Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is a somber time in this House to be speaking. It is a seminal time in Canadian history, in my view. It is apparent to me that we seem to be living in two Canadas. There is the Canada of fear and division promoted by the current Prime Minister and the leader of the NDP, confirmed by their caucuses. But there's another Canada out there, a united and proud nation that has sacrificed and done without and suffered economically, physically, and in their mental health condition. This is a Canada that is a bit worn out, plainly speaking, but still firmly patriotic and ready to take on whatever the future brings. They are Canadians who do not share this PM's post-national narrative and embrace the essence of Canada that they see themselves as a part of, as the true North, strong and free. In our national anthem, we call out to God and we pray that He keep our land glorious and free. The truth is that Canada can only be glorious if it is free, meaning its people are free, free from tyranny, free from government abusing its awesome powers, mindful of the responsibility and trust given to it in a representative democracy. Because this Prime Minister wants to dwell in the extreme, infringe and false narratives of what is happening during peaceful protests, I am choosing to address those other Canadians. I remember the historical term, the two solitudes, Mr. Speaker, in reference to impasses between Anglophone and Francophone people in Canada. Its meaning was meant to refer to a perceived lack of communication and, moreover, a lack of will to communicate. Here today we see history repeating itself, Madam Speaker. A lack of communication, but more significantly, a lack of will to communicate between the present federal government and Anglophone and Francophone citizens alike. The Emergency Act is extraordinary legislation. Extraordinary means remarkable, exceptional, unusual, and uncommon. The measures in this Act are to be entered into reservedly, advisedly, and with extreme caution. Through all the trials and tribulations of a newly created and burgeoning nation, trying to unite coast to coast to coast, through other public health emergencies, through other civil unrest, our federal government saw fit to invoke the Emergency Act and its precursor, the War Measures Act, only 4 times in our history. These extraordinary measures were used in World War I, World War II, Prime Minister Trudeau I, and Prime Minister Trudeau II. Excuse me. World War I, World War II, a previous Prime Minister in the 1970s, and the current Prime Minister. It was not invoked, Madam Speaker, during the fears and protests around the Spanish flu. It was not invoked during the workers' strikes in the 1930s, not invoked during the crises in Oka or Ipperwash or Caledonia, during the aftermath of 9/11, during crippling national strikes affecting our supply chains, during the rail blockades or pipeline protests, also negatively affecting the Canadian economy. The list is long, Madam Speaker. The point is, where other methods and authorities exist to deal with serious disagreement, government should use those methods and authorities. Government should not subjugate free people to abusive, wide-ranging, freedom-altering overreach of government. A Liberal member asking a question earlier in this debate said to the Leader of the Opposition, well, what if this happened in your neighbourhood, in your riding? Well, it did happen in my neighbourhood, Madam Speaker, and in my riding. It happened at one of the border crossings in South Surrey, White Rock. I received many reports on the ground about the activities there. I did have 3 complaints through national media calling the people involved the same outrageous, inflammatory names that the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister have been using. There were no complaints to my office. On the other side, I have had overwhelming outpourings of support from my constituents because the supporting protests were meaningful to those in attendance. and even joyful in hope for change. What kind of change? Not necessarily a change in government, although that might happen in the next federal election, but most definitely a change in federal government approach. On 2 previous weekends, vehicle after vehicle in support of the right to protest, this government's policies, actions, and inactions drove in a rolling loop around those border crossings and highways in South Surrey, with thousands, not hundreds, thousands of Canadians cheering them on from the sides of the roads and on highway overpasses. Those involved were vocal but peaceful, holding high Canadian flags, singing the national anthem, saying prayers, and greeting others cheerfully, including the police. The result, Madam Speaker, is that the border has been cleared. Goods are flowing, and the police, using tools already at their disposal, were able to show both respect for the protesters and clear any impasses. Why is the Emergencies Act needed now in my riding? It isn't. The only distress being expressed right now from my riding is that the Prime Minister and his cabinet are showing disdain, having inflamed the situation, are not even attempting to engage in dialogue, and saw the only tool in their toolbox to be taking more power unto themselves. I have heard from many civil enforcement officers, civil liberties scholars, and lawyers on this subject, Madam Speaker. Collectively, they want me to remind the House that a public order event is not necessarily an emergency. We are down to a protest in a few blocks of downtown Ottawa. That's all. With some proper policing, the situation in Ottawa can be brought to a conclusion, as it has been elsewhere. Unlike some of the other events, in downtown Ottawa, our nation's capital, we're not at a U.S. border, so it does not affect imports and exports. I'm not sure who the leader of the NDP was referring to when he said, "Don't let your anger turn into hatred." The Prime Minister has turned his back literally on a large segment of Canadian citizens, showing them nothing but derision and disdain. This only escalates, never de-escalates, tension and disagreement. I had occasion, Madam Speaker, early in my career to attend advanced negotiation classes at Harvard Law School under the supervision of Professor Roger Fisher, the author of the acclaimed book titled Getting to Yes. There are necessary steps that should be taken in any conflict resolution. Some form of engagement, de-escalation, respectful dialogue, looking to best alternatives to resolve the conflict, short of the only one the PM has employed, which has been described as the nuclear option. I agree that we should never have been at this moment looking like a failed nation state. We are looking this way due to weak and ineffective leadership. It is that simple. Why invoke this act now when it was not invoked all those times before? The federal government should be talking to and engaging with citizens to resolve this conflict by introducing a plan to get back to normal. Instead, we have seen the federal government demonize and insult our fellow Canadians. Remember, Prime Minister, they are all Canadians out there on Wellington Street, and a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. I'm pretty sure I heard that somewhere before. Instead of creating a plan, engaging in dialogue, and looking for a peaceful solution, the Prime Minister is looking to invoke and stoke more fear and division. Countries around the world and Canadians themselves at home are looking at this and wondering, is this my Canada? Is this the Canada I have believed in patriotically, firmly, and with a full heart for so long? The truth is that the Prime Minister and the government initiated these protests by Canadians by calling them down in the first place and then not dealing with it as it unfolded. I think back to a former leader of the Progressive Conservative Party that went along with a former Prime Minister who invoked the War Measures Act, and then for the third time in Canadian history, and not during wartime, Madam Speaker. He voted for that War Measures Act. His name was Robert Stansfield. He later said it was the greatest regret of his life that he voted with the government that day. Edmund Burke is often quoted, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing." Well, I stand against this measure with every fiber of my being. I will vote no. This is a free country, and its people should be free to protest, free to exercise their given human rights, and we need to respect and engage them. Thank you.